Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another exciting month of our WatchGuard webinar. We are going to give it just one more minute here. We're right at 2 o'clock. We'll give it just one more minute, see if we get anyone else jump in, and then we will get started. Well, thank you all for joining us this month. We are excited to be back for 2022's round of our monthly WatchGuard webinars. This is our January 2022 update webinar. As always, I am your tour guide for the month, Madison Slater. I'm the VP of Security and Compliance here at JSCM Group and also responsible for teaching our WatchGuard classes. So we're changing it up a little bit this month just based off of some new information and new things that are happening with WatchGuard, something that we wanted to share with you all because this is something that I personally have been working on, and I think it's a really cool solution. And so I'm really excited to walk you all through this and to share what this new option looks like. So just to do a little bit of housekeeping before we jump into our content, everyone's lines are on mute just to make sure we all have a good experience. This webinar is being recorded. It will be available on our website if you want to watch it later, or if you have someone who was not able to attend with you that wants to watch it later. There is a chat window, so please feel free to send over any questions. Those are always welcome. We love questions, so if anything comes up, whether it's about what we're talking about today or anything WatchGuard, please feel free to send those over and we'll answer those at the end of our session. All right, so this month's topics, bullet-wise, it might look a little light, but again, I'm really excited to talk about this. I will go through our current firmware recommendations. We always like to share where we are with firmware. And then the focus of this month is actually going to be a demo. Now, as part of that, I'm going to talk about exactly what it is I am demoing and why I'm so excited about it. But that's going to be our focus this month. And then we'll talk at the end about our upcoming training. We actually just added a whole bunch of classes to our training over Q1 and Q2, so we'll make sure we share those with you in case you're looking to get some training for yourself or for a team member. So starting with firmware updates. Again, WatchGuard has different firmware available based off of the type of hardware that you're running. So if you are on older XTM devices, those have the latest release of 12.1.3 Update 7 that was released at the very end of December. That is the version that we are recommending. But as always, and if you have been a part of this webinar, you know that I've said this before, if you are still running an XTM device, please, please, please think about trading up. Those are very quickly all reaching end of life, but you're also stuck on old firmware and not getting the latest releases. So it's a good idea to get on updated hardware just to make sure that you're getting all the latest and greatest that WatchGuard has to offer. For our Firebox smaller T-Series devices and some of our older M-Series, so our T10s, T15s, M200s, M300s, etc., the new release for this is 12.5.9 Update 1, released at the very beginning of this year. That is the recommended release that we are going with. If you are on 12.5.9, Update 1 is purely bug fixes for that version. I never hesitate to go to an update. I always jump on it as soon as it is available. So if you are on one of those models, I recommend 12.5.9 Update 1. And then for our newer T-Series devices or our bigger M-Series devices, we have 12.7.2 Update 1 released at the end of December, and we recommend that one as well. We've been rolling these out. We highly recommend, if you have not done a firmware upgrade recently, schedule some time. You're looking at, if it's a single device, about 10 minutes of downtime. So make sure you're scheduling that. If it's not something that you feel comfortable doing, or if it's something that you need done early in the morning or after hours and you just can't accommodate that, please let us know. We do offer our support when it comes to firmware upgrades, and we are happy to do those at a time that fits your organization. All right, so our content, remote access point. So one of the things that has happened, of course, with COVID is the need to have people working remotely. Now, as I'm sure many of you in this webinar experienced when COVID hit, it sort of came out of the blue from an IT perspective because all of a sudden we had users that now need to work from home. And I'll say when COVID first started really getting bad back in March of 2020, I saw an incredible increase in our ticket queue of people calling in asking about things like mobile VPNs because now we have a remote workforce. And of course, with that remote workforce, we need them to be secure because in a lot of situations, they're still connecting back to our primary office or back to our AWS or our Azure. So we don't want to let just anything in. Now, mobile VPNs are a wonderful solution when you have a remote user, but there's also limitations. And we got those questions all the time. How do I force my user to be connected to the mobile VPN? Well, with certain VPNs, you can do that, but it's not really the easiest or most cost-effective solution. What about hardware? How do I make sure that they're connecting with the hardware that I want them to connect with back to my main office? Great question. There are some things you can do like TDR, host sensor enforcement, but again, we experienced this mass exodus of people to their home, and we didn't really have a lot of time to prepare. So what a lot of organizations did, including ones that we work with, was started looking at, do we roll out a small firewall to each of these sites, to each of my home users? Now, that in and itself can present some issues. One is cost. Even a smaller T-series device, you're adding a decent amount of overhead of cost to your budget. And because we weren't prepared for this, that wasn't necessarily in the cards for a lot of people. Also, when you deploy a firewall to someone's home, you have to deal with their internet connection. If it's a firewall that you want to be able to manage remotely, you're having to work with their ISP to make sure that the modem or the router is in bridge mode or pass-through mode so you can actually connect to it. It just becomes a bit of a nightmare. If you have one or twosies, that's fine. But again, when we saw this mass workforce now being remote, it started causing a lot of problems. So this is where the remote access point comes in. Now, one of the reasons that I'm so excited about this and one of the reasons that I picked this to be our topic this month is we have a client that we've been working with that we did a proof of concept for them to see if this remote access point was going to work. And I'll be honest, when I first was figuring out exactly what the remote access point could do, I myself was a little skeptical. Something's going to go wrong. It's not going to work the way that I want. I will be happy to say that I was pleasantly surprised. It's very easy to set up. I personally struggled with it because there is a section where you have to include information about our certificate. I forgot the commas, of course. But honestly, the rollout of these things is going to take about 20, 30 minutes. So what is a remote access point? So what this is an access point that you are deploying out to a remote user. Now this, in the situation that we're working with, this is for remote individuals working from home, but this could also be something that you're using for a small branch office. It's supported on certain models of WatchGuard APs, the AP225W, the AP327X, and the AP420. Not all of their APs support this, but they've got some good options there. So what this does is you deploy this access point out into this user's home or out into this small branch office. And really what you're doing is you're extending your network through this Wi-Fi connection out to this remote site. So what this looks like is the user takes this access point home, they plug it in, and you are providing them with your SSID, and you are providing them with the authentication that you want. So whether that is a pre-shared key, whether you're doing enterprise, you can decide what that looks like. Now, this integrates very easily with the WatchGuard firewall. Why is that important? Well, because what you're doing is creating a tunnel through essentially a mobile VPN out to that access point. And the final benefit of it is that it's really easy to roll out. So what this looks like is that this access point gets plugged in at the user's home. There is essentially a VPN connection that is created back to your main firewall. You dictate what SSID they're connecting to. You dictate what the authentication protocol looks like. But when they connect to that wireless network, their traffic is going across this behind the scenes VPN connection and it is hitting your firewall. Now, once it does that, it's just like it's a mobile VPN user. So whatever access we want them to have, we control purely through our policies. If we want to restrict their web traffic, we can restrict their web traffic. If we want to restrict what access they have to internal devices on our network, we can restrict access to internal devices on their network. So if we want them to be able to RDP into our terminal server, sure thing, they can do that easily. And they can do it by the internal IP address. We don't have to do any weird natting or anything like that. It all goes across this VPN connection. From a monitoring perspective, we can see their activity. Also, from a security perspective, you can lock this down. You can decide what authentication protocol you want them to have. You can also do MAC address filtering. So you can say, I'm only going to let your work computer attach to this Wi-Fi network. Home laptops, those can be enjoyed on your own personal internet. The remote access point, I think, is a game changer when we're talking about remote workforce because let's face it, it's not going away for a lot of organizations. A lot of companies, we're back in the office, here at JSCM, we have been back because our business requires that we are physically present in our office as much as possible. Not everyone is like that. And there are plenty of organizations that are opting for the remote workforce. But of course, we in IT are now struggling with that from a security perspective and from a management perspective. The remote access point solves that. So how do we configure this? Well, first you do need to purchase whatever of these access points you want. I believe the ones that we were working with, I think they are the AP225Ws. What I liked about these access points is that they do have physical interfaces on them. So in the situations that we're rolling these out currently, the user has a work device, typically a laptop, so they need Wi-Fi, but they also have either a phone or a printer that needs connection back to the main office. Easy enough. The access points that we're using have physical ports, same thing across that connection. So to configure this, the first thing that we do is we really just set up our VPN. So this is actually all done with the IKE v2 VPN. So in setting this up, the first step, if you already have an IKE v2 VPN, great, we can use that. Otherwise, we would be going through and setting up the IKE v2 VPN on the firewall and specifying what type of authentication that you want to use. So for example, I've just got this local mslater account that I'm using. So let's say this is the account that I'm going to be using for this remote access point. Now, from our perspective of controlling access, if you have been through any of our webinars before, we've done demos on this, but one of the big things when you're talking about a mobile VPN is making sure that that user's access is controlled. So one of the ways that I typically do this is by using policies like web traffic, using policies that control DNS, what outbound ports I want them to have. So whatever authentication I'm using, I can add those into my policy. So what this again is going to look like when they connect to that mobile or when they connect to that SSID, that connection gets routed across this VPN tunnel, it hits my firewall, and I will still be able to see their traffic through my Firebox system manager, and I'll be able to filter it down to what I want them to have access to. So from the firewall's perspective, you're really just setting up a mobile IKE v2 mobile VPN. That's it. Making sure that you get that account set up. The rest of it is going to be done in our Watchguard Cloud. So that is going to be done here. So this is under watchguard.com. It's under Watchguard Cloud, Watchguard Wi-Fi Cloud, and then this is all done in the Discover portion. If you are not familiar with the setup of Watchguard Wi-Fi Cloud, that is perfectly okay. From a navigation perspective, there's really just a couple of things in here that you need to understand if you've never seen this before. And the first is that it's all handled by location. So what this means is that you can have different folders with different settings. So if you're thinking about a mass rollout for this, you can have all of your access points under one folder, in which case they're all getting very similar configurations, or you can break out your folders so that each folder has its own setup. So I'm going to just set up I'm just going to set up a separate folder just for this access point that I would be rolling out. So I'm just going to add it under my general location. And again, really the folder is just a container. So to configure the remote access point, there's two particular things that you're setting up. One is the tunnel itself, and then you're setting up the SSID that is going to be used to allow the user to connect. So if I go under configure, the first thing that I want to do is set up my tunnel interface. When you're setting up a tunnel interface, we're going to set this up as a VPN tunnel. I have my external IP that my VPN is using. I have my different versions of my setup. You still have phase 1 and phase 2 settings. All of that is going to be part of how you're setting up your remote access point and how you're setting up your mobile VPN. Okay. And then we have our secondary, which is going to be the phase 2 of the VPN. Once you set up your tunnel interface, it helps if I make that very secure. All right, once you get your tunnel interface set up, then we're going to create our SSID. Let's make sure we actually get that saved. So then we set up our SSID, and again, this is what the user is actually going to be connecting to. So this is where you get to decide, does every remote user have a different SSID? In the case of the organization that we're working with, they're setting all of their users up with the same SSID. Each of them is just that way they can tell their remote users, here's the name, here's the password. All right, so let's just call this JSCM remote. You can set this up as a private or a guest network. I can hide my SSID. Here I can choose the security. So let's say I'm going to use, for right now, I'm just going to be WPA2, set my password. And then under network, this is where I'm specifying a little bit more of this requiring that it is our mobile VPN. So it's a VPN tunnel. We select the tunnel interface that we created. You are natting. So basically what happens is when this connection is created, the access point itself will get an IP from this mobile VPN, but you can NAT IPs behind that. So let's say I'm rolling this out for a home user. I'm going to take into consideration how many devices do they actually have. So they're going to have a computer and a printer. So I really just need 2 IPs here. So I can pick whatever I want my internal scope to be because it's just natted on their side. That's never going to matter on my firewall side. It's just going to show up as the IP of that mobile VPN connection. So let's just say 192.168.10.10 and 192.168.10.11. We will just give them 2 IPs. If I can type IPs today. Does anyone else ever do that? All right, 192.168.10.1. And then our subnet mask, that is just going to be 255.255.255.0. DNS server by default, it's going to try to give it Google. You can give it your internal DNS server. So let's say at my office, it is 172.16.4.4. Pick that one. You can split the tunnel on these. Not something I would recommend from a security perspective. I don't want to get too far into the weeds on this. Let's go ahead and save that setting. So in order to activate this access point, we activate that under our WatchGuard account. That will then show up here, and then you can associate the access point into the location. So basically you pull the access point into a particular folder, and then it associates those settings into that AP. So what does this look like from a connection standpoint? I, of course, like to always test this in the office. So when we are doing the setup for these, we take that access point, activate it. You just need to plug it in where it gets an internet connection. It does not matter if it is behind a firewall. It doesn't matter if it's plugged into the user's actual internet connection. The only possibility that you could run into having some problems from what I experienced, if it is behind another firewall and you're blocking outbound IPsec traffic. Otherwise, you can tell this user, take this home, plug it into an open port on your internet modem or your internet router, and it should come online. That will then deploy the SSID that you have set up for this user. Once they connect to that SSID, in this case, I gave them an internal DNS server. So when I was setting this up, I did a very simple ping. Can I ping the DNS server when I'm connected to that SSID? From a monitoring perspective, what you will see on your firewall is on your Firebox System Manager, you will see in your authentication list, the user is set up as a mobile VPN user. And from there, you can monitor your traffic through the firewall. Now, I skipped a couple of steps. There are a couple of little tweaks, like making sure that you get the authentication put in for that mobile VPN user into your remote access point. I'll be very honest. The first time I did this, I had never touched it before. So what did I do? I followed WatchGuard's help documents. It's one of the first things that I tell students when we're teaching a class is use help documents. They are there for a reason. WatchGuard's help documents are very good at walking you through what this remote access point looks like and making sure that this is set up the right way. Because I actually missed this. It's supposed to be EAP, and then this is where I would put in the login credentials from my mobile VPN. So there are a couple of little steps like that that you have to make sure that you get, making sure that you've got your EAP method set correctly. It's honestly very, very simple. Again, I did this all pretty quickly. Where I messed up is that I used, you have to use the public key authenticator. You pull the certificate out of the IKE v2 from your firewall, much like you pull out the files when you are setting it up for a remote user. And when I put in the identifier, I forgot to put the commas in there. So it should have taken 20 minutes. Of course, I struggled with it for an hour and a half trying to figure out what I did wrong and ended up retracing my steps. Forgot the commas. It's why you read very carefully if you're following a help document. But what I will say, aside from my misstep with the commas, the remote access point setup was honestly one of the easiest things that I have done with a WatchGuard. Considering the power that this has to change how we are handling remote users, I am absolutely fascinated and excited about this. I am hoping that we have more people that start moving to this, honestly, because I see the calls, I hear the calls, talking to people in class about what it means to have to manage all of these mobile VPNs. Now you have a piece of hardware, you tell them to plug it into the internet, it comes online, they see the SSID, they connect. Through this, again, you can do, let me save this really quick. Yep. Sure. Through this, you can do MAC address filtering. So you can say what devices are allowed or not allowed. There's lots of, you can do scheduling. So there's lots of different stuff that you can do inside of this to restrict that, even once it is out in the field, to make sure that not just anyone can connect whatever device they want. So if the remote access point, if this looks like something that might solve your problems, what we did with our first client is don't eat the whole pie at once. Purchase one, see if it works. Maybe it's not going to work for your users, but let's face it, us as IT people, we are always needing to work remotely. Stick it in your own home. But I will say we have been very happy with what it can do, and I'm really excited to see more people start to embrace this because I really think that this is the future of remote work. WatchGuard is not the only one that does this. A lot of other firewall providers out there have it, but honestly, I think that their implementation of it is super simple. Very impressed with it. All right, and as I stated earlier, we just went through and added a whole bunch of new classes for our Q1 and Q2 for our WatchGuard training. We do have a class next week here in Charlotte. All of our classes are also virtual. I know that sometimes getting out in person can be a little difficult. Our virtual classes are the exact same experience as what you would have if you were here. You just don't have to stare at us directly, but you still get all of the same information. We do keep this updated, make sure that we're covering important information. So if training is something that you have been looking into or something that you have a member of your team that is interested in doing, we have plenty of classes coming up between now and we've scheduled out through the end of June. We're trying to hit East Coast, Central Time, West Coast. We do teach these classes, even if you're virtual, we teach them on the time zone listed. So plenty of options out there for you. You can find those on our webpage as well as the link to get registered. And yeah, just a great way to get you up to speed or to get someone on your team up to speed on all things WatchGuard. All right, so now I will open it up. We got about 5 minutes left. If anyone has any questions whatsoever, please feel free to send those over and I will be more than happy to answer them. And again, it could be about anything that we talked about today or just anything prodding your brain from the world of WatchGuard. Just one thing I meant to mention, from a remote access point standpoint, one of the difficulties with trying to decide if you're going to put in a firewall is then having to worry about licensing that firewall because the security is all coming from the firewall that has the VPN itself. That's part of what makes these remote access points a very cost-effective solution. It's not like you're putting an actual firewall in with the cost of the hardware and then the cost of the licensing. You can use, let's say at your main site, you've got Total Security Suite. Great. That's going to be what's controlling that traffic. So it's making that a little bit more cost effective for you if that's a solution that you're looking for. All right, I haven't seen any questions come through. As always, if something pops into your head after this webinar, please feel free to reach out to either myself or your account manager. Both Adam and Sue are very happy to take care of you for any questions that you have. We really appreciate you all taking your time this month. We're excited to have another year of webinars for you guys. We're trying to change them up a little bit, bring you new types of content. If you ever have a suggestion, request, anything like that, anything you would like us to cover, shoot it over. We will be happy to do that. These webinars are for you all, so we want to make sure that they're relevant and pertaining to the type of information that you want to hear. So thank you all for your time. I really appreciate it, and we will see you in February.